Thank you very much, Mr. Toastmaster. And a few more organizational information before we start. And please, maybe the timer, if you could be patient for a little while. Indeed, I will give a speech 5 to 7 minutes. After that, you can reflect on my speech and come up within 2 minutes with nasty questions as laid out in the email in case you've seen it. And subsequent to these 2 minutes, feel free to shoot me, make my life difficult, and pose very nasty questions, which I have to answer in an impromptu style, so to say a personal table topics just for me related to my speech. And having said this, now the main part, the 5 to 7 minutes begin. Dear fellow Toastmasters, our Toastmaster meetings are great, not just for improving our public speaking skills, but also for learning more about the members, learn what they do and who they are. So thanks to the Toastmaster meetings, we know that some club members pitch here in our club before they run for office. Other members, they have a split personality. They don't know who they are or when they are who. So sometimes they believe they are Batman, and on the other day, they are the reincarnation of Neil Armstrong. And today, you're going to learn something about me. But it is not an icebreaker speech. I will tell you something about a project that I'm currently working on. And as Art has already mentioned, I currently work in the field of intellectual property. I work for the Swiss Federal Institute of Intellectual Property, short IPI. That's the equivalent to the US PTO, so the US Patent and Trademark Office. But I'm not an engineer, I have no scientific background, so I'm no patent examiner. I was once called by a fellow colleague of mine, the foreign minister of IPI. I have to admit, I like the title. So every time the Swiss IPI wants to reach out to some other IP office in another country, or if Swiss companies have IP issues abroad, just very hypothetical, some patent infringements in China, then these cases land on my desk and I'm asked to find a solution for that. And in the bilateral context, in the context with cooperation with other countries, we have 5 special dialogues with other countries, with our key partners. And one of those partners is Singapore. And at the end of the month, we have a meeting upcoming, and my current project is preparing this meeting and also conducting it. So what does this kind of meeting entail? As some might assume, if 2 parties meet on an international level, they not just meet, shake hands, and talk about what's on their head, but everything is meticulously prepared. And I have to do this. This preparation entails 3 steps, or 3 pillars, you might say. First, logistics. Second, agenda setting. And finally, third one, conducting the meeting. In the logistics part, so the first pillar, luckily I was able to get some help from support from our back office. They arranged the flights and the hotel in Singapore. But everything was on the ground, so in Singapore, transferred from the airport to the hotel, from the hotel to the meeting room and back. And if you want to grab something to eat, going to the restaurant, find a restaurant, make sure that certain allergies are reflected in the menu plans and so on and so forth. Everything also when it comes to phone issues, data, when they want to go Wi-Fi or send a message, every minute little detail, it's up to me to solve this. So in short, I have to babysit my Director General, who will be a part of our delegation. And as you know, the big bosses can be very persistent and demanding when they have certain ideas what they want to have achieved. So it means for me, I have to be incandescent to solve these problems. Coming to the second pillar, the agenda setting. And this is a very important part. So the make or break part of a meeting. As I said, everything is pre-planned, sometimes even pre-scripted. It's usually up to the host, in this case Singapore, to come up with an agenda to set the topics or suggested topics that we might discuss in a meeting. Then the other party, in this case our side, the Swiss side, can accept the agenda, make alterations, suggest other topics. So it's a long and very tedious process to finally agree upon an agenda. And this time it's a bit difficult because Singapore is a bit, you might say, relaxed or lazy to come up with ideas. The first draft they sent to us contained just enough topics to discuss for 4 hours. But this was more an insult than a serious proposal, because we are not flying around half the globe just to be in Singapore for 4 hours and then return. So I had, after some difficulties, had been able to nudge Singapore towards a full day meeting and having enough substance for that meeting. But since we're there for 2 days, I still face a challenge to fill the second day in a meaningful manner. It's not just that we are on holidays and have a good time in Singapore, even though that would be quite easy to do, but we have to have some substantive meetings, take some so that we have some tangible results that we can take back home. So everything related to IP, innovation, and the sort of monetization of innovation and IP. This is still a major challenge that I'm facing for the moment. And once now the agenda is set, the next part is kind of filling the agenda with substance from our side. So we need to have background information. We need to have speaking points, both active and passive. So what do we want to say? What messages do we want to send to the Singaporeans? And in case they come up with some demands or some requests for information, how can we best possibly prepare ourselves to provide some answers while being in the meeting? You have to know that it's not in that sense, the absolute subject matter experts who travel to Singapore. Otherwise, we would have to send half of our office there if you have a broad agenda. So everyone who knows the very minute detail of these topics could answer it. But these experts provide the information to us. We have to analyze or digest this information and be ready to answer based on this information. This is a huge challenge that we're facing at the moment. And finally, step 3, presentation discussion of this subject matter. As I said, my Director General, as a second person, the head of our patent unit, and myself, the 3 of us will be traveling to Singapore. So it will be also up to me to discuss some of these issues. And in some cases, I haven't even heard before anything about these topics that I will be presenting in Singapore and I don't want to say pretending to be knowledgeable about, but knowing enough about these topics in order to have a good discussion and not kind of evoke the impression on the Singaporean side, or when will he be finally off the stage so we can have discussion with the real experts. All 3 very challenging pillars that still have to be addressed. And as from today, it's only 3 more weeks before we depart to Singapore. So there's lots of things to be done, lots of things prepared and solved. And hopefully I will be able to do so in a timely fashion so that in the end, babysitting my Director General will be the main problem that I face. Dear fellow Toastmasters. And now it's for you 2 minutes to come up with nasty questions. I'm not quite sure if I can say I'm looking forward to those questions, but let your creative juices flow.
I have a question, Lars.
Thank you, Carl. But maybe do we want to wait just for 2 minutes so everyone can come up with some ideas? And I think in the end, depending how much time we have, and here I would appreciate some guidance from our Toastmaster of the day. Maybe 3 to 5 questions can be raised, and I'll provide answers like in a table topic session. Is that fine, Carl?
Yes, my question is, since you're going to all this trouble to set up this meeting in Singapore, and it's pretty clear that it's all orchestrated ahead of time, why do it in person? Why not just have a Zoom meeting?
It's a valid question, especially also asked by our budget guys. Why traveling all the distance, paying the flights, a hotel, all the costs that are incurred by such a visit? But regardless how advanced the technology is, especially now after COVID, and that you can there's so many more meetings in a virtual fashion. Still, meeting in person, it conveys you a much broader variety of information. The atmosphere, the feeling is something different, especially if you meet someone whom you're not so familiar with whom you meet maybe just once a year. Then it's much better to see the person, to also have some time at the water cooler or the coffee break, and make sure that the people are really not only physically but also mentally present, and that they're not just sitting in front of their screens pretending to look into the camera, or using AI that adjusts your eyes to focus on the camera while working on something else, because they think multitasking is possible, and so they just are, well, the hull of them is present but not the persons themselves. So it's a substantive benefit, I would say, having these meetings, at least on a high level, with persons you don't know that well in person.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carl.
Art, I have a question.
Yes,
I'd
Art.
like to know how you deal with international travel for someone who hasn't been to the country before. Do you prepare them ahead of time for the unique either laws or requirements or surprises that they may experience when they visit Singapore for the first time, such as perhaps chewing gum on a subway?
Good question. You have to say that I'm quite lucky that my Director General, she's already now in for 8 years in that position. So she has left Switzerland once or twice before. And so it's a kind of minor problem. No, but of course, there's some specifics to each country. Luckily, Singapore is quite an international country, also a hub. So they are very open for having foreigners. But indeed, it's very some laws are very restrictive from our perspective. It's not by coincidence that you mentioned chewing gum. It's quite well known. Also, doing drugs in Singapore is also not the best idea. Might be a life-shortening experience in a double sense. But I think for those persons I travel with, whom I know have some experience traveling to other countries, so I can babysit them on a lower level, so to say. Giving just a few general information would be sufficient, I think, in this case. Would be different if we had, for example, a meeting in Saudi Arabia or other places. And for that reason, we should be good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Art.
Arnie?
Yeah, Arnie.
Lars, how does your director react to your seeing it as babysitting them?
Well, do I have to pay you hush money, or what are you intending? Now, of course, I would phrase it a bit differently if she were present. Maybe it's providing best service that addresses her needs and special requests, because we all know people that are that high up the hierarchy level, very high in demand, have not enough time to care about or to solve these issues that the lower level human beings have to attend with every day. And for that reason, she can be very sure to rely on my support.
Lars, I have a question.
Sure.
Speaking of babysitting, what if one of the Singaporean people in the room brings their ill-behaved child because they don't have babysitting? How will you handle that?
Well, having myself 5, of course, very perfectly behaving kids with no exceptions. And my Director General, she also has 2 kids. I think the common denominator here would be to agree with my Director General that our kids are by far better behaving, that we can be lucky that not these rascals are ours. Not jointly ours, but mine or hers.
Lars, apparently some QAnon people have gotten wind of this meeting and used it to concoct an elaborate conspiracy fantasy that you are conspiring to somehow interfere with the American elections in November. It's up on all social media, and it's going viral. How are you going to deal with this?
No, it's a question very close to reality. Thank you. But I would try to associate this kind of um, theory to the Trump field, and that wouldn't seem to be some extraordinary kind of theory. Would be in the level of weirdness within the range of normal. Sorry for deviating from the no politics and no political positions rule for Toastmasters. No, but on a more serious front here, it's, I think, with such a nerdy topic that when you talk about intellectual property, making a bridge to influencing US elections or elections in any other country would be a bit difficult, especially since we do not meet any foreign policy guys in Singapore. We do not meet with the foreign ministry or with political parties who might later on have foreign policy discussions with the US, but it's just nerds meeting nerds. And for that reason, I think I should be safe from facing such allegations.
There time for one more question?
Yeah.
So first I want to say that the natural light in your office looks a lot better than the incandescent light. My question for you actually is about disruptions of plans. I just recently had a disruption. I was supposed to travel to my travel plan. I was supposed to go to Argentina to join my husband, and my in-laws got COVID the night before I was supposed to travel. So what happens if you and your boss get COVID right before? Hopefully nothing's gonna happen like that, but if it were to happen, how would you handle that?
Very good question. Indeed, something similar happened with during our most recent trip, where we planned to go to the UK. The day before the meeting, my director general, she fell ill and couldn't travel. So, but that's the benefit of having the kind of pre-scripted or prepared files. So she couldn't be there, present her or give her talks, or couldn't participate in the discussions. So someone else had to step in, her deputy, and he could rely on the information, the background information, the speaking points that were present in the files. So he could use the trip to the UK to familiarize himself with the topics. And now traveling to Singapore, the traveling time would be much longer, so even more time to prepare her or himself, whoever might step in. But indeed, having a delegation of 3 persons and 2 would fall ill would be, well, major disaster. I think the only serious option here would be just to postpone the meeting. It would be very unfortunate having made all the preparation and come to that point. But if the babysitter and the babysitted person are not present, it's a bit challenging. But if only one of us had COVID, that might be still doable, I would say. Because no matter how important we think we are, everyone is replaceable.
Can I ask one? Do we have time?
Yeah.
All right. It is my incandescent joy to ask this immature question that we're all thinking. What if someone has an extreme episode of flatulence? What would you do then?
For us who travel to Singapore, we can be nasty and try to blame the Singaporeans for feeding us very untypical food that we are not accustomed to. So it's their fault. And we hope they make up for it the next time.
Nice. Very nice.
Any other questions?
Seems not to be the case.
I
In
can
that
ask
case, I
a
would like to.
question.
Oh, sure.
What happens if your translator doesn't show up?
Well, it's a question that might be very pertinent for other meetings, but here we are having our discussions in English. Since it's in Singapore, English is the official working language. Luckily, we don't conduct the meeting in Chinese. That would be different. But in March next year, we're going to China, and if our interpreter there would indeed be a no-show, we would run into major troubles. Luckily, also the Chinese side, they come with an interpreter, so working language there is English. So maybe for some time we might use or abuse also the interpreter from the Chinese side. But that's something that can only be done to a very limited amount of time. We might call our embassy in that country in which we are in and ask them if they could send someone of their staffers to help us out.